It's not a documentary. It's an editorial hit piece. This trial made mainstream media look like a Mickey Mouse Club. Wow, NBC, this is bad. Hello, thanks for clicking on this video from Checkmate Humanity. Please subscribe, do all those things that tell you that my next video is coming, and thank you very much for this view. All right, so I just watched the documentary A Marriage on Trial, and I have thoughts. I have lots of thoughts. So in a minute here, we're going to go through it, and I'm going to react to a few different things in the documentary in real time. But I want to give you an overview of my thoughts on this piece. First, I believe this was meant to look like a hit piece on Johnny Depp. That is the way most of the public, I believe, will see it. I see it that way, but I also see it as a passive-aggressive hit on social media. I believe that NBC made a business decision that is really honestly based on the intense competition they've been getting. They and all mainstream media have been getting from social media. It's a legitimate concern. Their numbers are going down, social media numbers are going up. And I think one of the concerns by the journalists or by the news organizations is legitimate, and that is that people on social media who cover these things don't have training in, journalistic ethics, and there are some who will adhere to some ethics, and there are many who won't. So on social media, lies travel very fast, and the truth tends to just kind of seep out through the pores of all of the lies. So mainstream media has a legitimate concern about that, and I have the same concern. However, they are a business. They do need to make money. They need to get advertisers. They need to show that they have numbers for advertisers. And this trial made mainstream media look like a Mickey Mouse Club. I mean, let's just be honest. There was such an incredible amount of social media coverage of this, and what NBC looks to be doing is making this calculated decision that they're going to say, you know what, we don't think the trial outcome was fair, and we believe that's because of the social media coverage. And so those are the two primary themes of this piece. And, honestly, I think it's irresponsible because they label this as a documentary, but it's not. It's not a documentary. It's an editorial hit piece, okay? And mainstream media, if you're going to do editorial hit pieces, you have a journalistic ethic not to call it a documentary. Now, there's another really important thing I want to note about this documentary, and that is that what we have seen on social media and in mainstream media since the trial is that a primary aggressor, a narcissistic person, such that Amber is, will use any tool within her reach to achieve her agenda. And her agenda appears to be an agenda of discrediting Johnny. And you would think that after going through a 6-week trial and receiving such a definitive verdict, the loser would go home and go, okay, well, I guess I took it to the authoritative venue and they shot me down, so I guess I don't have a case anymore. But she's going to use the court of public opinion, which by definition is social media. And she has continued to use social media as a weapon against any creators on YouTube or TikTok or other social media that didn't have a favorable opinion of her. They've created entire campaigns to take down legal commentators, other commentators on social media. The Amber Heard team has made a concerted effort of continuing the post-verdict agenda on Johnny Depp. That is what abusers do. They will not accept another person's or group's point of view. They only see their point of view. And so even the court's point of view, even the jury's point of view is not being accepted by Amber Heard. So she has to get more vindication and validation for her side by going to the court of public opinion. And she has now weaponized NBC in this particular case, a calculated strategy to take a mainstream media outlet that is feeling a little bit scorned. She's using that to team up with NBC and do this hit piece that would put everything on social media. Well, I say it's bogus. Now, the mainstream media is participating in the disinformation to try to keep themselves afloat. And I'm sorry, I personally don't see that as a great strategy. I think that mainstream media needs to do better. But so now let's watch some segments of this documentary, and then I'll have some closing thoughts on the other side. Okay, let's start this thing.
The Depp case was a civil defamation suit. Civil suit meaning it's for money.
They're both public figures. There is a higher standard of defamation at play. It's about whether you maliciously went after this person with a reckless disregard of the truth.
Truth is an absolute defense to a defamation claim. The question was Ms. Heard telling the truth?
I'm hoping that everyone on YouTube or anywhere else who is watching the experts and the lawyers talk about what defamation is truly understand what defamation is and why it matters whether you're a public figure or not, because I hear a lot of people screaming, "You're defaming me, you're defaming me, I'm going to take you to court, you're defaming me," without a true understanding of what defamation is. And honestly, they make themselves not sound very credible, but they're also giving the audience a bad impression of what defamation is, and they don't have the legal capacity or understanding or education to be saying those things.
When she generally claimed to be a victim of abuse. Having the cameras in the courtroom sensationalizes everything. It becomes a soap opera of sorts.
Because there were cameras, people could edit videos online into TikToks, into rapid fire Twitter videos.
As you can see, what NBC is now choosing to do is create an editorial narrative where it wasn't just court, it was the court of public opinion. But I just want to say that just because there was a court of public opinion doesn't mean that the court ruling or the juror's ruling should be dismissed. That was the ruling. This public opinion thing is going to be here until infinity, right? And beyond. So you're going to need to get used to understanding how the court of public opinion works, especially in a high-profile case.
And watch it almost like a gladiator ceremony. It reminded me of the OJ case, in which you had all the world essentially watching what was an extremely disturbing trial. And this was an extremely disturbing trial.
This was a defamation case. And before you knew it, we had all of...
So after watching this entire documentary, I was absolutely disturbed by the fact that this woman, this Ruth Glenn, a CEO of the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, that she's the CEO of such an organization, because I don't think she is truly understanding the dynamics of the situation or what this really means. She's taking a clear stance, and we'll get to it in a minute, but I was disappointed in this woman.
These elements of domestic violence introduced.
After you said, "Let's drown her before we burn her," Mr. Depp, you said, "I will fuck her burnt corpse afterwards to make sure she is dead." Did I read that right?
You certainly did, yes.
Now, I want to point out that appears to have been among the worst things that Johnny said. And the defense, Amber's team, hangs their hat on that as if it's a big, huge, explosive revelation that he would say such a thing. And I just want to put a little context to that. I didn't start following this case until the trial started. And then I started going through all of the audios, and I started going through all the text messages and everything. So I was admittedly not as familiar to the case as a lot of other people on YouTube or in social media. So when I heard that that kind of text message was written, I thought that it was directly to her. And I believe that a lot of people were under the impression that it was a message that that she was privy to as soon as it was said. But in the court of law, that doesn't hold, because he didn't say it to her. He said it to somebody else. It's not a direct threat. You know, I've had somebody come on YouTube and direct a threat at me, you know, with their voice on YouTube, and the police wouldn't even recognize that as a direct threat. So a text message to another person that Amber probably didn't even see until discovery, who knows, I don't know, unfortunately, is not a smoking gun here. And, you know, but it does show that Johnny has kind of a dark way of communicating. And maybe that dark way of communicating can come across as abusive, you know, but that does not make him the primary aggressor. And we'll talk a little bit more about perfect victims and primary aggressors and stuff like that, because there's more in the documentary here. But I want to point out that that is the evidence that's used to show that he is perhaps verbally abusive. But both people in a relationship can have abusive tendencies, but they're usually in a domestic violence situation, there is a primary aggressor. Okay, so, and that is why there is no such thing as a perfect victim, and I really hate that terminology.
There's a text message from Stephen Duders, his assistant, to Amber, in which he says, "Johnny's awake now. He doesn't remember anything. When I told him he kicked you, he cried." There was...
Now, I want to address this, because this is why it's really important for people not to take a text message like this as a smoking gun. So we have no idea how Stephen Duders found out that Johnny kicked Amber. We know that he was on the plane, but we don't know for sure that he saw this thing happening himself. It could be likely that Amber is the one that told Stephen that she was kicked. So whenever Stephen was relaying the information back to Johnny about what had happened the night before, because Johnny was apparently very inebriated in a blackout, he cried. So we don't know. We don't know how Stephen Duders got the information, and that's why a text like this shouldn't have been, in my view, included in the court proceedings, and they weren't. But Amber's team keeps using the opportunity of the public opinion realm to keep pushing this out, even though it's been decided by a jury that she's guilty.
His emails and text messages throughout, including to her doctor, including to the nurses. Those were all kept out. Depp's team wanted to demonize Amber every way they can, and at the same time try to suppress any of...
You know, I didn't see a demonization taking place. If there was any demonization on social media, it was by the users. You know, social media users can be brutal, and they can demonize. I didn't see Johnny and his team doing any of the demonization. And you might say, well, you know, they created this force on social media that furthered the demonization, you know, from behind the scenes. As somebody who's been involved in social media for a very, very, very long time, it is impossible to manufacture both the volume of tweets, the volume of messages, the volume of social media, and the sentiment. It is nearly impossible. The volume of social media in this case was gargantuous. And while we don't know whether there may have been some coordinated campaign on the other side, what seemed to rise above all of that were the fact that people were locked into this trial and they had opinions, and their opinions were genuine. They didn't seem like, they weren't things that were repeated, the same words and the same phrases and everything that were repeated over and over. These were genuine sentiments, like true feelings of affection for Johnny that they couldn't get from Amber because she comes across as a phony, point blank.
The evidence of Mr. Depp's domestic violence. There were therapy notes that go back to 2011 when Amber...
See, it just really bothers me that NBC is deciding, okay, they're saying we now have these notes from Amber's therapist that we don't know whether they've been authenticated as really Amber's therapist, right, writing this stuff, or if it's Amber writing this stuff. But it was kept out of the court for a reason. And now NBC, on the court of a public opinion side, is saying, hey, look, we got this thing that wasn't first on social media, and now we're going to keep using it to prove our point that Johnny Depp's trial was a result of a major social media victory.
Did I myself reach the point of striking Ms. Heard in any way? Nor have I.
And right here, I want to stop while he's testifying and say that in all of my review of Johnny Depp's testimony, I didn't feel like he was coming across like he was acting. Now, of course, that's his craft, right? He has the ability to make me think that. But this appeared to me to be authentic and genuine and not performative, which is a big contrast to Amber's testimony.
I ever struck any woman.
A man has to live within a system and a society that does not believe that he can be a victim. Men do not traditionally come forward.
Ms. Heard, in her frustration and in her rage and her anger, she would strike out.
Of all the domestic violence victims, it's 85% women and 15% men. I do believe strongly that.
I think part of that is because men don't report domestic violence as much. And maybe because they won't be believed.
That men are underreported.
She said that she was going to give all of her divorce proceedings to charity.
You have not donated $7 million of your divorce settlement to charity, right?
I think this was a pivotal point in the trial. I truly do.
I have not been able to fulfill those obligations yet.
I did not hurt you. I did not punch you. I was hitting you.
Another audio clip.
I'm gaslighting
she
you.
Appeared to be mocking him over his claims of being abused by her.
And see what the jury and judge think. Tell the world, Johnny. Tell them, Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp, man, I'm a victim too of domestic violence. And yes. It's a fair fight.
That's damning.
See how many people believe or side with you.
There was violence from Mr. Depp toward Amber, correct?
Yes, you're right. With Ms. Heard, he was triggered, and they engaged in what I saw as mutual abuse.
I will tell you, in all my years, I've never heard the term, ever. When we're talking about domestic violence, we're talking about a primary aggressor. In the context of retaliatory abuse, sometimes it's...
I just found it really surprising that this person understands this concept of retaliatory abuse and doesn't see that it was Johnny that was doing the retaliatory abuse, or Amber, because you'll see what she says at the end.
You beginning that exchange, but until you're in a situation in which someone is hurting you, you don't understand the dynamics that are at play there.
I was the love of my life, but he was also this other thing, and that other thing was awful.
Of course, they had to get this one in there, right?
Members of the public
showing Johnny at his worst.
Look at recordings as being a little bit underhanded.
You got this going.
I mean, just remember, she was sitting there filming him while he was doing this, and this was the day after his mother died, if I remember correctly. His mother was either dying or had just died, and they got into a fight. Now, I'm not excusing being a maniac, but he wasn't doing anything to Amber. He was beating up the cabinets.
It just goes to the overarching question of which party had the jurors' trust.
Amber Heard has submitted quite a few photos into evidence of her injured.
With respect to photos of Miss Heard, I think that the jury most likely found the testimony of the gentleman from TMZ to be very compelling.
Ms. Heard was filing a restraining order at a courthouse in downtown Los Angeles. So I dispatched... I'm
going to tell you, as someone who's been working with the media for a really long time, the minute I saw those photos from that court, her exiting court scene, I knew it was staged. I knew she had planted the paparazzi there.
camera people to that location. We would only ever send people there if we had been tipped off.
And the TMZ former employee effectively said that that was staged. When jurors see that, they're going to lose a lot of faith in anything else that's presented visually or otherwise.
I did not call TMZ or any other news source or paparazzi.
Do you hear her words? I did not call. I didn't. Of course not, Amber. You have people who did that. We're not dumb.
Source, no one.
Amber Heard has said on the stand she doesn't have a clear recollection of how things unfolded, but she has alleged that he sexually assaulted her with a bottle.
I felt this pressure. I felt this pressure.
Okay. Look at this. Look at her.
With a bottle.
Here.
I felt this pressure. I felt this pressure.
I'm going to tell you a little story right now. A number of years ago, I was at a ski resort and we were eating lunch in the big, warming hut 2, it was called. It was at Mammoth in California. And it was very crowded. If anybody who goes skiing, especially on holidays, knows that during the lunch hour, cafeterias on the mountain get very, very crowded. So it was very, very crowded and it was very noisy. But above the noise, I could hear this wailing, and we look over and we see this little girl who's sitting on a table and she's surrounded by family who are all kind of talking around her, and she kept going like this. Ah! Ah! That's how I see Amber. She was crying, she was making noise, and then she was looking around to see if she was affecting anybody. This is what I see on Amber in all of this testimony, especially when she's crying. Look at how, when I tell a story like this, and I have stories like this, okay? When I tell a story like this, I don't want to look at the person that I'm telling, because it's usually I'm covering my face in embarrassment or I'm looking away because I don't want to see the look in their eyes when I tell them, because it's actually an impact on them. I know it hurts them for me to tell this story about what happened to me. So that is why it is so unbelievable to me to see her sitting there, wailing and in all these dramatics with no tears, and she keeps looking around at the jury. And it bothers me that NBC doesn't pick up on this and that NBC is running with this mantle just because they have a business decision to make about discrediting social media. Their biggest competition by far now.
Sure. He on my pubic bone and he said he was punching me.
Let me tell you, that's the way you would tell the story if it had literally just happened. If it had literally just happened. Having been through many of these situations, okay, unfortunately, I'm not asking for sympathy whatsoever, but I'm telling you, this is how it feels to tell the story for the first time. Not for the umpteenth thousandth time, like I believe Amber has done.
I just saw his arm. I could feel his arm moving.
There were a couple of points in the trial that should have never come out so publicly.
I didn't know if the bottle that he had inside me was broken.
Yeah, well, and the woman is crediting this as a side of the trial that is actually a credible story. I agree that it shouldn't have been told because it is not a believable story. If you have a vagina, you know that you're gonna know if there's a broken bottle up there, okay? Especially if it's shoving it up there. I'm sorry, it's just unbelievable that she even made this claim. It's so disgusting and manipulative and unbelievable.
I didn't know if he would know if it was broken or not, and I just remember thinking, please, God, please, I hope it's not broken.
Survivors have reached out. They have been triggered. I know that myself, I got triggered.
Yeah, we're all triggered. It's very triggering.
My back was towards you, but you hit me in the face.
Ew, this is so cringe. Guilty.
A lot of times jurors...
Now, I'm going to say this. I didn't really love the mocking videos. That is one of the reasons why social media gets a bad rap, you guys, because this was a person on trial. And, you know, even if she doesn't sound believable, okay, say she doesn't sound believable, but mocking her in the middle of a trial that very well could be, you know, a re-victimization. I mean, I've seen people in true crime mocking actual victims, you know, death victims. So that is a thing inside of us that really needs to be tampered down, you guys. There's no need to mock people or people who claim to be victims of domestic violence. This is why social media gets a bad rap.
Whether male or female jurors, they don't want to see a woman cry. They don't find it believable.
Here she is being forced to recount all these.
Now, he just said that, you know, seeing a woman cry makes it not believable. Unfortunately, that tends to be true, but that wasn't real crying from Amber. And B, I think it's a ridiculous norm that we have that when you start to cry, you're not believable. It takes more strength to cry than to scream and yell and act violent toward another person.
Things, and what do they say? Oh, she cried. What's wrong with these people?
Would you please stand and face the jury?
The jurors were not sequestered. The judge would instruct them each night not to do any additional research.
This is a long proceeding spanning 2 months. I just think it's unrealistic to think that the jurors stayed off of social media.
And once you're on them, you can't avoid it.
This monster of algorithms at play.
So I tend to agree that it's true that it was impossible for people to ignore social media. But they're basically saying that the 10 people they chose to be their jurors had no ability to compartmentalize that for the seriousness of the case. And I think that's disrespectful and probably untrue. I think that the jurors took their role seriously. And they rendered the verdict that they thought was appropriate.
TikTok just went crazy. The ability to do short films, mocking someone or giving your opinion about something is what TikTok is, and they certainly did.
Leaned back.
Yeah, and they're allowed to do that, but I agree that it's really unnecessary to mock somebody in this situation. It's weak sauce.
Headbutted me square in the nose.
The breadth and depth of what we've seen, and particularly the attack and abuse aimed at Ms. Heard, is something remarkable. Can you imagine being a survivor and seeing the mockery that she's endured?
So now here's the thing. I am a survivor who has endured mockery of my situation on social media. People are allowed to do that, but it can be absolutely devastating. It can be absolutely devastating. But what one needs to understand is that Amber's actions did contribute to the response on social media. Again, I don't think that it was right. It's right for anybody to mock her, but this is not a justification. It's just an explanation that pop culture just tends to be the kind that will mock someone, especially if they seem unbelievable or phony. Social media especially is that way. So it's going to happen, and unfortunately it is a factor of speaking out, but that shouldn't be a reason not to speak out.
If you actually watched it live on YouTube, there's a live feed, and every comment I saw while I was watching it for 6 weeks were pro-Depp.
If you want to go...
Yeah, but they weren't manufactured comments. They seemed to be genuine reactions to their genuine belief that Amber was coming across less and less credible.
Go viral, you're going to want to talk about the events in favor of Johnny Depp.
I really think it has a lot to do with Johnny Depp wanting the cameras to be in the room in the first place. I think he was aware of the public's perception of him.
Johnny Depp was a...
You know, another thing I'm very struck by is that the people that they're interviewing for this documentary, not one of them understand the in-depth workings of social media, and their paycheck isn't dependent on social media in any way. They don't get an income from social media. And I'm a true believer that you can't really speak on an experience or speak on a situation until you've really been in it. And none of these people are participants in the ecosystem of social media. So they see all these things that happened from the outside in this case. And I do think that NBC did a disservice by not having a active YouTuber or an active, like, someone who monetizes on TikTok to talk about this stuff and what the experience is like and why, and that was a choice that NBC made, not to highlight actual social media participants. Well, because they're competition now, and that's really, really troubling.
You also had segments of YouTube that had never covered anything even close to this trial.
Now, that's not true. And that's a really unfortunate thing, like, especially, like, moving to this creator here.
You also had segments of YouTube that...
I know that this creator has covered a lot of events in pop culture, including a trial. So what they're basically saying is... oh, well, they've never covered this on a journalistic level, like, mainstream media. But they aren't saying that. They're just saying they never covered any of these trials. Well, you can cover these trials on social media. And as long as you bring some sort of, at least some level of accuracy and depth to what you're reporting, then people will also listen to the opinion as well. And that's what you have here with Popcorn Planet.
Had never covered anything even close to this trial, all of a sudden pivoting, people going from fewer than 100,000 subscribers to over 500,000 subscribers in a matter of weeks.
I really don't know anything about
that was just a natural phenomenon. Thank you. Well, a natural algorithm phenomenon. Because the algorithm knew people were going to watch it. The algorithm served up all kinds of videos. I certainly got my biggest watch video from this case. That's how the algorithm works. It's not something they're talking as if it was something that was manufactured intentionally.
About this?
I'd like to remind us all that all victims are not the same. Ms. Heard is what we would call the imperfect victim. As a society,
there are no perfect victims. So again, I really hate that terminology.
we have a stereotype of what a victim of domestic violence looks like. Victims and survivors of domestic violence each are different, and they have different experiences. There is no perfect victim.
There is no perfect victim. I really hope that people take away from this case and that they honestly do their own research on these kinds of domestic relationships and narcissistic abuse and just the dynamics at work, and start to understand that it can both be true that this person is abusive and this person is abusive, but that, in the case where something needs to be done and something needs to change, there's usually a primary aggressor in that situation. Even in toxic family systems, there is a primary aggressor, like dad who beats up mom, or mom who dominates the family and verbally berates everyone all the time. There's usually a primary aggressor, and sometimes it results in reactive abuse by the person who's being targeted. So if you take a look at the Gabby Petito Brian Laundrie case, we have the reverse situation where they were pulled over for a domestic violence incident. And though we know for sure now that Brian was a primary aggressor, because Gabby didn't come off as a perfect victim, they decided that because they can't choose one, they were going to choose her as a primary aggressor because she admitted to slapping him across the face.
The litigants each really tapped in pretty explicitly to the larger social media and the cultural narratives that have been surrounding the case.
They locked
No
in.
woman ever before Amber Heard ever claimed that Mr. Depp raised a hand to her. This is Me Too without any Me Too.
The verdict is in.
We have a verdict?
Yeah. Oh, shit.
Now, I was surprised at this point to figure out that most of these interviews were done, or maybe all of them, while the trial was taking place. So they didn't know the outcome of the verdict, and now they're seeing the verdict and they're having to grapple with, I was wrong. I got to grapple with that.
Jurors deliberated 13 hours. Verdict delayed. He won.
Look at the disappointment in her face.
Okay.
She's like, now I got to justify all of my positions.
That's gonna be an interesting fallout for a lot of domestic abuse survivors.
No, it's the opposite. There are many domestic abuse survivors who see domestic abuse in a very specific shape and form, and what they're now realizing is that there are many, many shapes and forms to domestic abuse, and that a man, even a very powerful, very popular man, can be the victim of abuse. That's what it means. This is mind expanding. It's not mind closing. Amber's not the victim of Johnny. Okay?
I think from Mr. Depp's perspective, his legal team put on an incredible case and pulled a rabbit out of a hat.
I can see why they say they pulled a rabbit out of a hat, because defamation cases are really hard especially for big public figures to prove. But that just goes to show how overwhelming the evidence was, and it is completely bogus to put that on social media. I'm sorry, it's bogus, and shame on you, NBC.
It's apparent from the jury's verdict, they didn't believe anything she said.
The jury awarded Johnny Depp $10 million in compensatory damages and $5 million in punitive. So, but then they also awarded $2 million to Amber Heard in compensatory damages. So then, if the counterclaim says that she never committed an abuse hoax, then I don't understand how you could have both things be true.
Now, it's, to me, it's sounding like she's trying to talk herself into a dissenting opinion that she's going to carry forward. And she can't understand why both of them would get a defamation verdict. Well, the defamation verdict against Johnny was about what his lawyer said, not Johnny's abuse.
What was his reaction in the moment?
I think just an overwhelming sense of relief.
Social media certainly took off in a way that we've seen high-profile trials before, but do you
Don't sound too bitter, Savannah.
believe the jurors saw any of that, were swayed by any of that?
No, I don't think there's any reason to believe that the jurors violated their oath, and that suggestion was disappointing to hear.
I don't know how they can possibly come to that conclusion. You could not escape it.
Do you see any larger?
Of course they couldn't escape it, but again, you're not putting trust in the jurors to be able to make as fair opinion as they possibly can with whatever knowledge they had.
Message beyond the case you tried?
No, I mean, frankly, we don't. We're here to talk about the case that we tried, right? We encourage all victims to come forward, have their day in court, which is exactly what happened in this case.
When we heard the verdict, we were very disappointed.
I was disappointed to hear this woman say that she was disappointed in the verdict, and it just, I think this person, if she runs the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence and spreading this message that because Johnny Depp is famous and popular and had social media behind his back, that he can't be a victim, that is extraordinarily destructive.
We have struggled for years to ensure that survivors' voices are heard. It turned out that the jury believed that, it was defamation, which is, by the way, a control tactic.
No, what they believed is that Johnny is the one being victimized, and therefore Amber did defame him by doing an entire multimedia campaign, which is still ongoing, by the way, to paint him as a woman beater. That's what she did. That is defamation, according to the jurors now.
By a lot of abusive persons in order to maintain control. Defamation cases will be exerted more often. It won't be pretty.
There will be plenty of plaintiffs who will file and pursue claims that
they're portraying as though Amber is a victim of this verdict. Oh, honey.
may not be winning claims, but they'll take that chance.
So if we imagine a college student who is a victim of sexual assault, who wants to tell her story, the worry is that we might need to start counseling victims that telling their stories can have a very significant financial price.
What happens?
That's always been the case. There's also going to be a public price to pay. Unfortunately, it shouldn't be that way. People shouldn't mock and try to discredit victims, but they do before even getting the full story. So people should be counseled about that anyway.
If I get ambered.
Get ambered. So you got ambered? No, getting ambered is Amber's abuse on Johnny. She's not a victim in this situation. That's very irresponsible to say.
Because we're beginning to hear those terms, or we heard the term that Friday, I will Depp you.
We are already seeing other celebrities who are accused of sexual violence filing defamation suits against their accused.
And just because Johnny and this guy, Marilyn Manson, are friends, we should not look at these cases as one template following another template and assuming that Marilyn Manson isn't guilty. I plan to cover this case. I don't know anything about it yet, so I don't have an opinion, but I'm not going to look at it through the lens of, oh, well, Amber was the primary aggressor, so obviously Evan Rachel Wood was. No, I'm not going to look at it that way. So give us a little bit more credit for our ability to parse things out and, in fact, help people know that they can parse this out and not categorize everything into oblivion.
We won't be shut down. I do wonder whether there will be that power in numbers again, whether people will be willing to go forward knowing they could get sued for defamation.
I strain to...
Yes, you'll get sued for defamation if you're lying. So what they're assuming here is that Amber's telling the truth and that this verdict was some sort of invalidation of a real domestic violence survivor's claims. No, that's not what this is. Wow, NBC, this is bad. This is really bad, NBC.
Call a case like this, where you had a celebrity who had fallen from grace, use a public proceeding in a court trial to rehabilitate that image. And that's what he did. And winning was a welcomed byproduct.
So they're portraying Johnny as the one using the court system as a weapon rather than as a true arbiter of who's correct and not correct in this case. But he hasn't mounted multiple social media campaigns, had his team go out to discredit all the social media in the world and sit there and not give a believable testimony. He's not the one that did that. So he shouldn't be looked at as somebody who's using the court system the way that Amber is and has been and is now doing with the court of public opinion.
I think looking back, people are going to think of this as the TikTok trial, the social media trial, the fan trial, because his fans really came out in such full force and really having fun with what were some pretty horrific claims.
And this also reminds me that the OJ trial was similar in that a lot of people were saying, this is the trial of the century. It was one of the first high-profile cases to be televised, and people were glued to their TVs. And there was also the sense at that time that the court of public opinion was going to be weighing in on the final verdict. But no, the court of public opinion was very, very much on the side of guilty, and he got not guilty, okay? So just remember that.
This trial really demonstrates the power of the internet and how campaigns for public opinion can shape real-world effects. So whether you're in politics...
So that in and of itself is a true statement, but what she's implying is that that was the reason that the verdict was that it was, and I vehemently disagree.
Politics, media, entertainment, this presents itself as a playbook.
You know, I saw, oh, is Me Too over? And you darn tootin' it's not. How do we deal with something like what just happened? She wrote an op-ed about her domestic violence. The op-ed and the social media were
if it was that
weaponized
simple, we
against
wouldn't
her.
have the verdict
so
that we
what does
have.
that mean to someone else who may want to talk about this?
It means they shouldn't lie about it. That's what it means.
It's going to be tough. We can do it. I never say no.
Just don't lie about it. Well, there you have it. As I said earlier, this was mainstream media's passive-aggressive hit piece on social media by way of Amber Heard is a victim of this verdict. And you know what, NBC, if that's the way you're going to go about things, and mainstream media, if that's the way you're going to go about things, is like lock in on your competition and start trying to discredit your competition, I predict your downfall even faster than it is already happening. Sorry, you did not do yourself any favors with this documentary editorial. Thank you all for watching. I hope you have a great day, and please remember, you don't know what's going on in people's private lives behind closed doors. Please don't show hate to anybody. Be kind to everyone, everywhere.